Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am Michelle Kidwell Gilbert, Chair of the Archaeology Committee of the National Arts Club. It's a non-political venue and the major such institution in the entire United States. Our committee feels privileged to present an extraordinary address this evening by His Excellency Ambassador Jonathan Miller, seated right in the front row, in celebration of International Archaeology Day, initiated by the Archaeological Institute of America. As is my custom, permit me some remarks related to what I deem to be the mission of the Archaeology Committee. Believing in the ethical responsibility to respect diverse cultures, our committee presents monthly programs to which the public is invited. Our members come from varying social circumstances, but bonded in the belief that if I am only for myself, who am I? And with a palpable love for art, for we have been waylaid by beauty. The exhilaration connected with excavations and glorious discoveries, ultimately rewriting intellectual history, exerts a mesmerizing spell. We delight in imparting knowledge. Archaeology has the potential to enthrall and, even more relevant, unify us. To understand the past is to enhance the present and anticipate the future. To understand the past in all its manifold variety is to acknowledge the unity amongst peoples. To understand the past is to confront life creatively, fully, profoundly. Our committee is concerned not only with today into tomorrow, but in altering perceptions for an improved future. Sites of compelling beauty can lead to greater appreciation of humankind's traditions and shared heritage, coupled with a global perspective on complex issues. So let us focus upon the sanguine interplay of civilizations and discern what unites us rather than what separates us. The National Arts Club International Archaeology Day programs occur yearly and dovetail perfectly with the club's theme for next autumn being Internationalism, in celebration of the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. The Archaeology Committee initial joyous International Archaeology Day event featured Cypriot Council General Kula Sapananu, now Ambassador, committee members involved with diverse archaeological organizations, as well as individuals working within the United Nations. Following this auspicious beginning, the committee focused on a particular nation by inviting its representative to the United Nations or Council General to address our special audience. Included in these annual celebrations, in chronological order, were His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Pulither T.B. Kahuna from the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, His Excellency Ambassador Mohammed Fatah Idris from the Arab Republic of Egypt, His Excellency Ambassador Vladimir Drobnik from the Republic of Croatia, Her Excellency Ambassador Vanessa Fraser from the Sovereign Order of Malta, His Excellency Ambassador Evangelos Sakarias from the Permanent Mission of Greece, who was planning to be here this evening, but will be in Washington tomorrow, and sent his regrets that he cannot join us. And from the Permanent Mission, the Honorable Consul General Michaelis S. Freelius from the Republic of Cyprus, who also sent regrets as he is unfortunately ill. And I know a number of committee members, I heard from 3 of them, cannot make it as well. So a lot is going around in New York, or this would be an overwhelmingly huge audience tonight. Ambassador Isaiah Shabala from Zambia and diplomats from assorted consulates, such as the Czech Republic and Turkey, as well as, again, Cyprus and Greece, have participated in our unique events. Tonight's splendid commemoration of International Archaeology Day by a renowned diplomat is being live-streamed to a global community. November 20th, highlighted by Ambassador Miller's presentation, is significant in world history. 1637, Peter Minuit, along with the initial grouping of Swedish immigrants, sailed from Sweden to Delaware. We then had 1789. New Jersey became the first state to ratify the Bill of Rights. 1805, to deviate slightly, Ludwig van Beethoven premiered his opera Fidelio in Vienna. 1941, Mrs. Roosevelt wrote a My Day column celebrating Thanksgiving and said, "There is so much for which we in the United States can be thankful. We should join together and say our prayers of thanks with very full hearts." 1959, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Children. 1977, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat met with Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and spoke before the Knesset. 1998, the first module of the International Space Station launched. So we have another fitting event to commemorate November 20th with. Kindly welcome, and joining me in doing so, since August of 2022, the Deputy Permanent Representative of the Permanent Mission of Israel to the United Nations. It is my sincere honor to enumerate just a few of Ambassador Jonathan Miller's manifold accomplishments and postings. Originally from Cape Town, he served as the Special Envoy for Energy for Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, directed the Department of European Union and European Multilateral Organizations in Jerusalem, as well as worked at various consulates and missions in Berlin, Mumbai, Nairobi, and Oslo. His address tonight focuses upon the Reuben and Edith Hecht Museum, established in 1984 and located at the University of Haifa. He discusses the museum's hands-on installations, displaying the rich archaeological history of ancient civilizations as the wisdom of the past continues to instruct us in the present, illustrating pathways into the future. But since Israel hosts approximately 400, an amazing number of excavations yearly, there will be many other fascinating displays to be relished at the Reuben and Edith Hecht Museum the next time we visit this famed institution. Mr. Ambassador, if you shall.
Do I need the box? Okay. Can everybody see me like this? It's better? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. Michelle, thank you to you and to the Archaeology Committee for making this event happen this evening. And also, I'd like to thank the National Arts Club for hosting us all here in this very, very beautiful and special building. It's my first time to visit, so it's really something very special. I'd just like to make a few comments before I start, and as you might understand, I'm not an archaeologist. Okay, I haven't studied the field, and so please, if there are any professional mistakes or incorrect terms that are used, I apologize beforehand. I've tried my best. And I think that there were a few reasons why I decided to look at the Hecht Museum in Haifa, which is not a very well-known museum, but it has some very unique aspects to it, which I thought were very appropriate and very perhaps interesting to hear the whole concept of the museum that go beyond the actual findings themselves. I actually, when I left South Africa and moved to Israel, I moved to Haifa, so I have a connection to the city itself. My youngest sister is on the staff of the faculty of the Haifa University. But I think that it's really a very, very hands-on and unique approach to archaeology, even combining it to art, which makes this a special experience, which hopefully we can go through this evening just to get a taste of what the museum has to offer and the concept that it presents. I think the idea is how to make, in today's day and age where everyone is stuck on their screens, archaeological findings and archaeology more accessible, more understandable, and more enjoyable for a whole new generation as well. And even though it's a little-known place, I think it has even its official title makes it interesting, and that is, it's called the Hecht Museum of Archaeology and Art. So some might say, how does this connect? Hopefully we'll find an answer sometime this evening. You might have heard the name of the museum. It was in the news this summer when a young kid actually, okay, this is just to show you where Haifa is, right? You can all see the arrow. It's in the northern part of Israel, on the Mediterranean Ocean, a beautiful city on a mountain. The university itself is right on the top of the Carmel Mountains, just outside Haifa, and has a fantastic view. And the museum actually utilizes some of the view and some of the gardens overlooking the area in its displays itself. But as I was saying, you might have heard and seen these headlines a little while ago. You might remember there was this story of a young kid who was walking around and was actually touching this 3,500-year-old urn, and he knocked it over and it shattered. Now, he and his parents were sure that they're going to be fined or arrested, and they didn't know what to do. They were so embarrassed because they'd come there on a trip with a family. The museum itself is free, so the entry is free, so families come. And they were in shock, and the museum said to them, "Don't worry, it's not a problem. This is part of our policy. You have nothing to be worried about." And you can see here that the whole incident went viral, as you all might have heard of it. And you can see the picture on the right. They actually restored the vase to its original place. In other words, they didn't say, okay, now we're going to put it behind glass. They said, we're going to put it back exactly where it was before. And they actually deliberately left some of the cracks and missing pieces in the vase, saying this is just part of the urn's history, right? This is part of its modern history. There's no need to try patch up and cover up what happened. But, and they're using it deliberately as an educational experience. And they actually invited the family back with the child. You can Google this, it is true. And they came and they showed them how they were putting the urn back in its place and how they are not cross with the kid because the kid was in absolute shock what was going to happen to him. So I think that this is perhaps just symbolizes what the museum stands for and how they interact with the community. And I'll go into some examples a little bit later. As it was mentioned, the Hecht Museum of Archaeology and Art, as part of the University of Haifa in Israel, was inaugurated in 1984. And it was the initiative of the late Dr. Reuben Hecht. Now, Dr. Reuben Hecht was actually born in Belgium, to a Jewish family in Belgium. He was born in 1909. And he got the rights to open the first wheat silos. His family was a shipping family in Belgium. They had a shipping company. He was born in Antwerp, as I mentioned. The company was called the Neptune Renania Shipping Company. And he left the family and came to what was then Palestine before Israel was independent. And he got the concession for 2 wheat silos at the 2 ports in Israel, in Haifa, up north, and in Ashdod. And he became a very well-known industrialist and entrepreneur. and he's actually seen as the founder of what's called the Dagon grain silos in Haifa port, and he's actually one of the founders of the Haifa University. He actually used some of his income and some of his international status as the founder of the university, and for many years on the board of the Haifa University. And he actually sees, and he saw one of the highlights of his activities for the university was actually the establishment of this museum on the university campus. He was actually awarded the Israel Prize for exemplary lifetime service to the society and state, and that is one of the highest honors that we in Israel grant to our citizens. He had a very, I'm going to go just tell you a little more details about the man to understand how colorful he was, because that's what led to this becoming a colorful institution. He was actually a principal aide to Prime Minister Menachem Begin at the Camp David peace talks in the 1970s, and he attended meetings with Jimmy Carter, with Ronald Reagan, with Anwar Sadat and Margaret Thatcher. So he was involved in diplomacy as well. So here, maybe the connection to why I'm standing here tonight, telling you about this great man and his work, life's work. He established the Hecht Museum, as I said, at the Haifa University, and it was actually his collections that started off the museum, and with archaeological artifacts and with the 19th century paintings. The Hecht Museum is housed on 2 floors in one of the main buildings of the University of Haifa and on the campus, and has, as I mentioned before, spectacular views of the bay, of the city, of the surrounding area. You can even see the Mediterranean Sea, the ocean, from the campus. And this jug that we saw is actually at the main entrance of the museum. So this is the first thing you actually see as you walk in. And there's a busy food court of the university right opposite. So this is just how everything is incorporated in the life of the campus in the university. The entrance is always free. And due to the location and historical ties to the university, the museum itself hosts classes and serves as a training resource for students in the archaeology department of the university itself. The Hecht Museum also has a small auditorium for performances and lectures and for cultural events. This is the auditorium that they have at the Hecht Museum. The concept behind it was actually to create a cultural institution, and not so much a museum. Because the idea was to be at the service of society. How do you link the museum to a society? Otherwise, it just becomes a shell. And the museum is open to public all year round. The only day it closes is on Yom Kippur, our Day of Atonement, one day in the whole year. And it was actually the request of the late Dr. Hecht that the admission is free, and it remains free until today. The educational concept of the museum as a museum located on an academic campus in the University of Haifa is perhaps best reflected in the words that Dr. Reuben Hecht wrote at the opening ceremony of the art wing of the museum on January 11th, 1989. And he wrote the following. I translated to English, so I hope it makes sense. The museum, lest it become a dormant institution, must breathe life, so that young people and classes from schools will come to visit. It must be a place of research, of inspiration, and animation that will serve wide circles. It must not become a warehouse of ancient art objects like a tomb, but must form a chain with a soul that binds our past to our future. And this is the magnificent auditorium that the Hecht Museum has. It has unique acoustic qualities, and it can seat up to 380 people. And they actually installed, you can see the picture of a flute organ, which was installed in the auditorium and was actually restored from parts of organs that were in use in the last century in churches from all over Israel. So they collected pieces from churches all over Israel and put together a functioning organ in the auditorium itself. The Hecht Museum is currently going through major changes and transformations, to try and keep vibrant and up to date. And this year, the museum actually inaugurated an open sculpture garden overlooking the Haifa Bay. The old wing for archaeology will be completely renovated, and it will include a new and up-to-date treasures that will accompany the museum's permanent collection. There will be a room of wonders that will commemorate the memory of Dr. Hecht. A permanent display that will be dedicated to 10 selected sites from the excavations of the Haifa area and to the north of Israel. And next to them, there will be an activity complex for children that will be actually established as part of the museum to get children more interested and more involved. There will be additional exhibition space that will be built next to the existing museum. There will be a new wing that will be dedicated to the heritage of German-speaking Judaism, and to the entrance plaza, which will become a cultural space connecting the existing museum to the new wing. And this will include an exhibition area, a museum shop, a rest area for the convenience of the visitors. And as I mentioned, the museum is intended to serve as a center for learning and cultural inspiration for school students, the residents of Haifa and the surrounding area, and residents from all over the country, and guests from overseas, of course, also welcome, who aspire to expand their knowledge in fields related to archaeology, art, the Bible, heritage, and the land of Israel studies. The museum today offers over 40 educational programs for students, as well as enrichment programs for adults. So they're active, adults can come from off campus and do courses that the museum offers. There's also very significant activity that is carried out in the Arab and Druze sector, which also include meetings between Jewish and Arab youth. The museum also places special emphasis on the activities of children and adults with special needs. As a museum within a university, as I already mentioned, the museum is also intended to serve as a study and research center for students and academic staff at higher education institutions all over the country, and especially at the University of Haifa. Items from the collection are studied by researchers and graduate students, so they can actually use hands-on approaches to doing research on the findings of the museum itself. And the research is actually published in a publication of theirs called Machmanim, and it's an archaeological journal of the university. It can be accessed online as well, if anyone has an interest. And there, the research that is done based on the findings of the museum are published in this journal. You can study, you can use the museum, even if you're not an archaeological student, even if you come from other faculties, you can make use of the museum and its findings. The museum itself believes that, especially now in these times, dealing with history, culture, and values, it's just as important that museums are the community within which they operate. So there's a very strong connection to the communities themselves, and they should be available, inclusive, at eye level, and accessible as much as possible, even if the cost is occasionally knocking over a 3,500-year vase in the process. So let us look a little bit at the museum itself and some of the specific findings and which I will show you here this evening, just to give a taste and flavor of the different sections of the museum. There is a traditional archaeological wing, okay? And as I said, this came from Dr. Hecht's own personal collection. Already in his youth, he showed a very, very keen interest in archaeology of the land of Israel. He worked very hard for about 60 years. He collected archaeological items that represent the material culture of the land of Israel in ancient times. And we won't go into the discussion and the huge debate of if it's finders keepers, who do these items belong to, but he saw this as sharing, the need to share, and that's why he left his whole collection to the museum itself. He was interested in particular in fields that represented the periods that had a historical significance for the history of the people of Israel, from the Canaanite period to the end of the Byzantine period. Those were the areas that he had a particular interest in. He also was very, very active in Zionist activities for the creation and establishment of the State of Israel. And he believed that archaeology is one of the most important manifestations of Zionism, of the Jewish dream for a homeland, and that the ancient finds are proof of the connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. This was the central space in the archaeology wing is dedicated to Dr. Hecht's private collection, which he began collecting in the 1920s. This space was named by him, the people of Israel in the land of Israel. It displays unique items found in wealthy homes, used in worships and feasts, but also many pottery vessels that were used in the daily operations of the houses. In the wing, you can find mainly items belonging to the various Canaanite peoples who lived in the land of Israel from the 3rd millennium BC to the end of the 2nd millennium BC, and many findings belonging to the Israeli period, which commenced at the end of the 11th century BC and ended with the conquest of the land by the Babylonians in 586 BC with the destruction of the first temple. The museum displays archaeological pieces from the late Dr. Hecht's private collection, together with pieces that the Israel Antiquities Authority have lent as permanent pieces to the museum, altogether 8,000 items. Now let's look at some of the key items in the section, because I know this is the part that interests most of you, right? Dedicated to the people of Israel and the land of Israel. There are a number of, we can see here on your right, a number of anthropoid pottery coffins. These were discovered in Dir el-Balach near Gaza and attributed to the Canaanite culture from the late Bronze Age, approximately 3,500 years ago. The coffins are inspired by the burial coffins of the pharaohs, since at that time the Egyptian Empire ruled the region of Palestine and influenced its inhabitants culturally as well. Inside the coffins were found luxury items that belonged to the buried, who believed they would be resurrected in the next world. We can see next to this also a rare collection of ancient coins, including the world's largest and most important collection of portraits of Jewish rulers from the end of the Second Temple. Okay, we have here a, I'm sorry, how do I go back here? Okay, we also have here a collection of, no, that was right, I'm sorry. We have a collection of written seals from the biblical period, approximately 2,800 years ago. This is one of the largest and most important collections in this field in the world. This is something that is quite strange to find in a small museum like Haifa. They have 140 seals from Israel and neighboring countries, including those testifying to the role of the seal owner in the administration of the kingdom, and they have a very rare woman's seal, testimony to the social status and legal rights of women in the Semitic Western society during the biblical period. There are also unique findings from the excavations of the Temple Mount that were led by Professor Benjamin Mazar in the late 1960s of the last century, that were part of what has been lent to the museum by the Israel's Antiquities Authority. You can see here on the left a large limestone fragment carved with geometric and plant designs. This is from 1st century BC and was discovered near the remains of the eastern Hulda Gate in the southern wall of the Temple Mount. We have here another very interesting piece, which is a sundial with a 7-branched menorah, a 7-branched candelabra, from the end of the Second Temple period, 1st century AD, and it was discovered near the western Hulda Gate in the Temple Mount excavations. On the back side of the clock is engraved upside down a 7-branched menorah, probably with 3 legs, which is one of the earliest evidences of the description of the menorah, the candelabra that we know of today. The dimensions of the clock indicate that it could have been used as a portable clock, so it's a very small piece actually. The prominent fire marks on it indicate that it was exposed to the fire set by the Romans during the destruction of the structure in 1770 AD, and serves as a living testimony to the terrible destruction that befell the nation on that day 1,954 years ago. Another space in the archaeological wing is dedicated to the Phoenician culture of the land of Israel. The Greeks called these merchants living in the port cities along the coastal plain of the foot of Mount Lebanon and to the south by the name Phoenicians. In the language of the Bible, the inhabitants of the northern coastal cities are called Sidonians, right? We have today the city of Sidon. David and Solomon, the kings David and Solomon, recognized the superiority of the Phoenicians in the field of sailing and maritime trade and maintained political and trade relations with Hiram, king of Tyre. Diplomatic relations with them led to the marriage of Ahab, king of Israel, with Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians. In the 11th or 10th centuries BCE, according to the earlier assessments, or around the 8th BC, according to those who claim it happened later, the process of expansion and settlement of the Phoenicians actually began as they spread throughout the region. Usually, this was done through peaceful trade, westward, first to Cyprus and then to the Mediterranean islands, and to distant shores of North Africa, Sicily, Sardinia, Malta, and Spain. In a southerly direction, in the settlements along the southern coasts of the country as well, not only maritime. The Phoenician material culture is a continuation of the Canaanite culture of Israel and Syria in the late Bronze Age, but it has its own characteristic signs. In the exhibition, the culture is presented as it is reflected in the pottery, the luxury items, the burial customs, the Phoenician inscriptions, and the architecture. The contribution of the Phoenicians to the beginning of naval architecture and the technology of port construction is particularly highlighted throughout the exhibition. Most of the finds in the exhibition were actually borrowed from the Antiquities Authority of Israel. They were discovered in excavations at the Phoenician sites in Achziv, in the north, in the sea opposite the coast of Shavei Zion, in Tel Akka, in Tel Kishon, Tel Abu Huam, and the Phoenician port of Atlit. These are all ports and areas just off the coast of the northernmost parts of Israel. Another space in the museum is dedicated to ancient industries and crafts. As I mentioned, Dr. Hecht himself was an industrialist, so this had special importance for him. And it focuses on the 7 ancient crafts and industries: metalwork, wood, stone, glasswork, and mosaic, the scribe's craft, and the doctor's craft, all in the wing itself. Among the variety of unique findings, you can find a rare certificate from the days of Bar Kokhba rebellion, 132 AD, with the name of Bar Kokhba, or as it appears there as Shimon ben Koshba. Unfortunately, general staff's orders or soldiers' battle diaries that testify to the course of the rebellion, the fighting methods, or the figure of the commander who headed it have not been discovered to date. Only dry documents were found, like this one, that testify to the daily life of the residents. A rare example is in the museum. This is a promissory note written on parchment and the date in Kislev, the 2nd year of the redemption of Israel by Shimon ben Koshba. In the note, Yosef ben Hananiah admitted that he had borrowed 4 dinars from Yehuda ben Yehuda, and at the end of the signatures of the borrower and the 3 witnesses to the fact that he had borrowed these 4 dinar. In this section as well, we have a mosaic floor from an ancient synagogue, Bet Leonatis, which is in Beit Sha'an on the eastern side of Israel. This is, again, courtesy of the Antiquities Authority. It is named after Leonatis, who is mentioned in the inscriptions of the mosaic itself. The mosaic is about 1,500 years old and decorated with many figures of animals and has 4 inscriptions in Greek and Aramaic. And in the central medallion is depicted a 7-branched menorah again, the candelabra that we saw earlier, that was used in the temple, and above it is written the word peace. You can see the 4 letters at the top, just above, Shalom, that is peace. Another rare find that they have at the museum is a cosmetics or makeup spoon, designed in the image of a naked swimmer holding a duck. The wood is sycamore wood, and it's inlaid with stone. It's the 19th or 18th dynasties of Egypt, between the 12th and 14th centuries BC. So even then, right, women, this was very, very important, right? So it's not something new today. We also have a wing of the museum dedicated to the ancient ship from a place in Israel called Michael's Anchorage, Ma'agan Michael. It was actually discovered in 1985. It was the remains of a merchant ship that was wrecked about 2,400 years ago. And it was discovered by chance near the shore of kibbutz. There is a kibbutz called Ma'agan Michael. There was a thick layer of sand and layers of blast stones that covered the remains of the ship. And this, in fact, prevented the damage to the wood and the other perishable artifacts. There's the stitching of the wooden panels at the back of the ship and in the bow, as well as other findings, indicate that the ship was probably of Greek origin. During the excavation, the remains of the ship and its contents were recovered from the sea in a rare state of preservation. According to the professional assessments, the ship's crew numbered about 4 sailors. Its length is about 14.5 meters. I'm sorry, I don't have that in feet. And it's a width of about 4 meters. Its load capacity is approximately 15 tons, of which about 12 tons are stones. The ship sailed with a square sail on the mast, the base of which was discovered intact at the center of the lower structure. It's a one-of-a-kind wooden anchor is on the right side of the bow, and the unique preservation operations made it possible to actually reassemble the ship's hull in the wing designated for it at the museum itself. So it was actually reconstructed because they were found in such a good condition, and it's actually very, very impressive to see this. Another wing, as I said, we have a very good mix of different kinds of periods and different kinds of art, is the changing exhibitions in archaeology, and currently they have on an exhibition called The Great Revolt in the Galilee, which is the northern part of Israel. The feeling was that as a museum that is part of the northern community in Israel, it was important to exhibit for the first time the bloody campaign that took place in year 66 of the Christian era, between the Jewish settlement in the north of the country and the Roman government. 4 years later, in the year 70, the Christian era, Jerusalem was destroyed and the temple with it. So this was actually a revolt that took place 4 years before the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. The exhibition focuses on findings discovered at sites in the Galilee where some of the very fierce battles were fought. The central findings are from Gamla, which is up in the north, and Yotfat. Among the findings, there is a flat stone bearing engravings on both sides. On side A, you have a rectangular, we have a rectangular structure topped by a pyramid, maybe indicating that it's some kind of mausoleum. And on side B, you have a crab or zodiac sign of the cancer. And it's possible that the engravings were done by a person who was subject to a heavy siege, right? Surrounded by death, he perhaps symbolized the approaching end by the mausoleum on the one side and the time of death by the zodiac sign of cancer on the other side of the coin. The zodiac sign of Cancer represents the month of Tammuz, and in the Hebrew calendar, and there is a proverb in Israel in Hebrew that used to say, "We will die in Tammuz." So this was seen as a sign of that perhaps the end was near. There's also walls of a room from a well-to-do house in Yotfat that was decorated with murals, very beautiful, impressive murals, and at a very well-preserved state. And on the floor of a room, the dramatic image revealed the diggers that was reproduced, there were the bones of a man, and there were arrows still stuck into the actual skeleton that was found inside this house. Now, as I said, this is a museum of archaeology and art. Okay, so there's actually an art wing in this museum as well, and this has original masterpieces with Dr. Hecht's private collection, and it represents various trends from sorry, wrong way. Various trends from the 19th and early 20th century art, mainly Impressionism and the Jewish school of Paris. The important painters that are displayed in the collection include Manet, Monet, Pissarro, Modigliani, Soutine, and Struck. A painting of special importance is an oil painting by the painter Modigliani, which was painted on both sides of the canvas, in which a portrait of Maud Abenet is depicted on one side. On the other side, I think we have this one, no? There we go. Yeah. On the other side is a naked female figure, and on the same canvas itself. And also on display is an early Van Gogh painting, or Van Gogh painting, and 7 works by Soutane, which constitute the largest collection of Soutane amongst all the museums in Israel. It might seem apparent that the art collection is a field of creativity that is distant, right, in space, in time, and content from the archaeological connection. But Dr. Hecht did not think so, and that's the reason why he put that there. He perceived the art collection, similar to the archaeological collection, as a way to connect to the Zionist idea. The two movements of Zionism and Impressionism, in his opinion, marked the end of an era and the beginning of an era. Both were rooted in tradition and the past and led towards the future. And this art wing has 2,400 pieces in the collection. I think we went, there was one. Okay, so we have here a Vincent van Gogh, right? Done around about 1884 to 1885, oil on canvas as part of the collection. Sorry, I'll get this in the end. Okay. We've already seen the piece by Amadeo Modigliani, okay, from around 1908. And it's a canvas that's been painted on both sides. And here we have a Chaim Soutine, Bakan Sumer Street, done like 1923 to 24, oil on canvas, again, part of the collection at the museum. Now, I mentioned also a new sculpture garden, which was put using the lawns of the campus, and you can see in the background the view looking north over to the Haifa Bay. And it has 21 outdoor sculptures that were created by 18 different Israeli sculptors, including Mika Ullman, Menashe Kadishman, Amos Kainan, Yechiel Shemi, Eran Shakin, and Yigal Tomarkin. For those of you who know Israeli art, some of these are the leading Israeli artists, sculptors in their field. They were actually previously displayed in an industrial park much further up north in Israel, a place called Tefen. And when it was closed down, it found a new home here at the Hecht Museum at the University of Haifa. And these are actually, even some people might recognize the names, they're actually some of the most important sculptural work in Israel and are actually milestones in the art scene in Israel itself. There is also a museum park near the university with authentic buildings that were expected to be destroyed following construction and development works, and they've been reconstructed along the paths surrounded by the woods and natural vegetation right outside where the museum is situated. Among the buildings, there are grain barns from a citadel in the Negev that were brought up from the south. There is from the Israeli period. There is a burial structure from the Chalcolithic period, which was discovered near Kibbutz Palmachim down in the south. And there's also a very impressive textile house, which was discovered in Castra, site near the entrance to the city of Haifa. Now, I will finish there. There's still so much more to see, but I think, again, just to recap, you have here a very impressive, in my opinion, attempt to try and bring a link between archaeology, art, sculpture, and bring them all together under one roof, which I think is quite unique, and to find the fact that they are all part of Israel's history and Jewish history and links us to the land. So that was something that was very important for Dr. Hecht. I think the fact that it's in a museum inside a university campus in one of the main buildings links it to the students and to the academic staff and can be used as a resource for learning and studying and not just for the people to look at. There is also a very strong hands-on approach, as we saw in the beginning, very hands-on. But I think that this is something that really, there are a number of displays and a number of pieces that they really want people to touch and feel so that they connect to what's happening. And the fact that it's free and open all year round for people to come in and visit is to make it accessible and to make it user-friendly in today's terms. So I hope I gave you just enough of a taste to make it sound like an interesting place to visit. You're always all welcome to come and visit. And I want to thank you all for this opportunity here this evening, not to talk about politics, not to talk about the situation in the Middle East, but I think to really discuss as humans some of the things, the history that binds us, the history that connects us, the culture that we're all interested in. And there's no better place, I think, than the National Arts Club here in New York to do this. And I really appreciate the time. And I hope you will all come and visit the Hecht Museum in Haifa and enjoy what it has to offer. So thank you so much.
Of course, I'm the one who leads the stand, not the ambassador. I want to thank you for this most illuminating talk. We learned a lot from you. And I think it's so exciting when you go to college to have a museum right there, to have this part of your everyday education is really a unique circumstance, and how fortunate those students are. May we take some questions in the audience now? And I think you are going to come back. Do we have any questions? First from my husband, Gordon. Yes.
Do you know to what degree the present archaeological contents of the museum are those originally donated by Dr. Hecht as opposed to subsequent additions?
Right. I don't have the exact figures, but I did look into it, and I think it's roughly about 40% are his original, and about 60% are from the Israel's Antiquity Authority. But they've been lent also permanently to the museum, so it's not as if they have to be circulated or moved around. So I think they complement each other well enough within the museum.
Okay. You know, it's interesting. We've had talks, and I'm going to give you some information a little later about something that was sponsored with the Israeli Antiquities Society, because they do so much important work in Israel. Now, I saw Brenda. Was that your hand? No, yours. Yes.
Does the school have an archaeological team working right now on any particular project that you could share with us?
They need me to speak. Yes.
Second mic here
Oh.
as well.
Okay, it's a short answer. I'm not quite sure. As I said, and I don't want to get into politics, things are a little tough up north right now in Israel, so there's a limited times being spent outside in open areas. It's unfortunately the last year has been quite difficult. So I think a lot of the digs and ongoing excavations have been halted to a certain degree. But that's why the museum itself is being used much more, because there are still pieces and items that are not on display and the students have access to. So that's the situation right now. I don't have much more information on it. Thank you.
But I want to, if I can make comments about two recent finds, okay? And I can't tell you how. One I was reading about, one of the earliest examples of a wheel used in the textile industry was just discovered, and it meant that humankind had a greater sense of science than we thought at a certain point. And that rewrites history with knowledge. And the second thing that I had read about also is that some of the recent discoveries have said that the Romans who were fighting at Masada against the Jews, it was a shorter period than had been believed. So through archaeology, we're continually having discoveries, whether in Israel, certainly, these are two examples. There are other places that rewrite intellectual history, and I had mentioned that. And that's very exciting.
Thanks a lot. Actually, the wheel that was found, I think, is about
The size?
this. It looked, no, but again, it's as you say, it's really a significant find. And again, regarding rewriting history or updating history,
Right.
a lot of these things become almost like urban legends, right? So even the finds themselves
Yes.
have a difficulty in changing because you've created a certain narrative. But I think that's what actually makes it very interesting, that you can
Yes.
you can try, develop, and challenge an existing narrative through the use of archaeology. Is I think, like you say correctly, what makes it
Yes.
so fascinating. Yeah.
It does to me. Yes, please.
I was wondering about what some of the materials were in these artifacts. So there was a woman's coin in the beginning that was very wide. Do you know what that material's made of?
Let's see if I can find
You know,
the.
notice something. For all of us Americans, this is backwards. Obviously, in Israel, you read in a different direction than we're used to, and you can see it with the slides as well. Yeah. Yeah. No, a little further.
Oops, what's going
No,
on?
no, that, the Egyptian.
I'm doing it in Hebrew now, right? Yeah.
One more.
No, one more.
Go up.
Up.
No, a little more. There, you did it.
This thing goes the wrong way, right?
Right? This is what I said.
This
Ah,
one.
there,
Okay.
yes.
You're referring to the seals, or
The seal, yes.
yeah? Have to check my notes, right? No, I don't have the material, but it was about 2,800 years ago. Old. I think, I presume it's some kind of stone. It's a reflection of the light that's making it look. It's making it look. Not to worry. Stop the YouTube 1 sec. Yeah, sorry. Okay. So I think this could be a good excuse to actually go into the website and maybe of the university. It has a very good website. It doesn't have all the information I gave, but it could be a good way of exploring. What do you think it's likely to be?
I thought some kind of a polished stone, agate or something.
That's very possible.
Yeah, but it would come from the region, so it would be from the region. So agate is not that common in the area. So, and of course limestone would be very soft, right? Too soft to have as a seal. So that's a very interesting question. I'm not an expert, but thank you.
Well, I'm going to make a comment, and then I'm going to call on Steve Pekar from the committee for two things. One is that I went on the website in preparation, and it really is a very interesting website, so I mention it for all of you. Now, Steve Pekar, who has a question, also teaches geology at Queens College. So, Steve, material, what do you think? And here's
So, actually, first of all, I just want to say, I gave a talk at the University of Haifa a few years ago, and it's a beautiful university. And I went to the museum, I was thinking about, I went to the museum, I saw their pictures of it. This is it.
Okay.
I know you could have talked for another 30 minutes or an hour. It's an amazing museum. The next time you go to Israel, you should definitely, it's so worth it. And the university itself, right on the hill like that, is beautiful. So actually, since you had the slide up, this is what was my question, because when I saw this, that I was driving on the left, how big is that piece? Is that like, what's the scale of that? Is it, you were saying it's for the second temple, which is
Right.
so
It's a fairly small piece. It's not.
like this.
That was the urn that was broken at the.
right next to the wheel. Right, exactly.
A bit bigger than the wheel, yes. But I think that, thanks very much. Like you mentioned, You know, sometimes Haifa is not always on the tourist map. You have the famous Baha'i temple. It's the world center of the Baha'i faith.
Yeah.
Is in Haifa, so that they have magnificent gardens that are also worth visiting. And then you can go up to the university and visit the museum.
Yes. Do we have other questions from the audience? Okay. Well, I want to thank you, if I can use my notes for a minute. This has been absolutely fascinating, and we learned so much from you. And all of your friends who are ill, I want you to know in around a month, this lecture will be online, so everyone can learn from the wisdom of Ambassador Miller with pleasure. And I thank you. Now, in addition, right on the back table, there'll be some notebooks with thanks and some pins from the Israeli mission. I left something there also, and that is we had 2 lectures which are online that I thought some of you would like to play. The first one was Jerusalem before King David, and the second one is about the Philistines. So once we started to put our programs online, it's really been an asset that we can learn repeatedly from some of the wisdom of our speakers here. In addition, I had written an essay to accompany the St. Petersburg opera production of Samson and Delilah. And what I did is I was interested in how the Israelites and the Philistines related to the Egyptians. So you'll find that on a sheet in back. So I thank you very much. This has been absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And